just to talk about my son and how his life was similar to that of George Jackson, and how he used the principles of Black August to survive. He spent he was in prison for about 20 years. He spent 11 of those in solitary. He was a product of the school to prison pipeline. We moved to Pittsburgh in the 80s. 80s and 90s is when the prison started expanding, and when they decided that they were going to start putting everybody in prison. And my son became a product of that through his elementary school. This started in elementary school with him getting thrown into juvenile facilities instead of being, getting detention or suspension. They had probation officers in the schools at that time. Just fast forwarding to him going through all these juvenile facilities, he turned out to be a very angry young man because of all the facilities that he was in. He was abused by white racist guards. He called him nigger all the time, told him he wasn't ever going to be nothing. So when he was finally released, he was in these institutions from the time he was 5 until he was 17. He was in and out, but he was never steadily home. When he turned 17, he was let out, and he was in a program, a juvenile program, but he ended up doing he ended up doing a robbery about 4 months after he turned 18. And he could have been kept in the juvenile system, but they put him into the adult system. He was offered a plea for 5 to 10, but he did not take that plea. And because he didn't take that plea, he got 5 to 20. So once he got in prison, he sat down, and he always was a person that studied, and he was always well advanced beyond his age, and very studious, and always educating himself. When he got in there, I was always sending him all this information about our Black nationalists and everything, all of our revolutionaries and stuff, and he was reading this stuff, and he was also sharing it with other guys his age, trying to get them to transform themselves. And that's what started his whole history of being in solitary confinement. They started, he got thrown into solitary for like a minor infraction, but he ended up being in there for 11 years. And all the while he was in there, he was being starved, he was being beaten, denied yard, denied basically every human right that you can think of. He also started studying the law. And he became known as a well-known jailhouse lawyer. He helped a lot of people, and that was also another reason for him to be targeted. The last time he was transferred, it was because he found glass in his food, and I had always been in contact with the superintendent of prisons. I was emailing him, faxing him, calling him, writing letters. And he basically told me to stop writing him, and I told him, no, when your guards stop, that's when I'm stopping. And I called him and I said, hey, they put glass in my son's food. You know the history. I've been in touch with you all this time. And he moved my son, and that's when he moved my son to Dallas. And that's when they moved him there, like you said, he ended up being around a whole bunch of brothers that was doing the same thing he was doing. Doing activism, doing resistance within the prisons. During the time he was there, he was subjected to torture again, and they were trying to stop the torture of people, and they did a peaceful protest. They ended up being beaten by the guards and transferred. They were emergency evacuated to other prisons. And once my son got to another prison, the Human Rights Coalition, which he was talking about, I'm also a part of that. We filed charges against the prison for what they did to the prisoners, and my son also filed a complaint against the judge of Luzerne County because he had been writing this woman to no end, and she never did anything, so he sued her for turning a blind eye. Well, the judge and the prison got together and they charged all these guys with riot in retaliation. Took them 7 years to be exonerated. My son and 2 of the other guys represented themselves, and they had a standby lawyer, and they beat these charges. And my son they still ended up trying to charge my son with the assault of the 6 people who assaulted him. And he beat that. He had to plea out because he had been over his minimum, like 14 years. He was like way past his minimum, and he wanted to go home. So he took a plea disorderly conduct or something, so he could come home. And he ended up suing the newspaper of that county because they put some false stuff in the newspaper. And when he came home with a check from them. I know there was something else. Brother, the way I kind of connected him to George Jackson, there's a brother with the National Jericho Movement. His name is Brother Jihad Abdul-Mumid. He had been writing my son, and being in contact with him. And when me and him talked, he was like, your son reminds me a lot of George Jackson. And once he said that, he made me realize, hey, he is. Just to talk about how he survived during those years that he was in solitary and in prison, using those principles of Black August, study, fast, train, fight, which he didn't he didn't know about that, but that's exactly how he survived. He survived by constantly educating himself. Like George Jackson, he studied the work of revolutionaries and shared that information with other prisoners. He truly believed in each one teach one, and he mentored those who saw his advice. He was always doing exercising and training, and they wouldn't really allow books for self-defense, but he would have me find these books that you do like certain movements or whatever, but they were self-defense movements, so he was able to study those movements for his self-defense. Fasting, he was always fasting. He still fasted after he came home. He used fasting as a form of defense and to train his body to be able to deal with the times when he was being starved. He also used it to cleanse his body from the toxins and from the poor diet that they give them. His fight, that was his best character. His fight, he was known for his knowledge of the law, and he used his pen as a sword. He helped many people legally, like I said, and I look at prison litigators as the conductors on the Underground Railroad, because that's how a lot of us our brothers are getting out, from them helping one another and then getting a lawyer on the outside to finally, get them on out of there. Oh yeah, I just wanted to talk also about the some prison litigators. Afeni Shakur. She fought her case and won her case, and of course he named Mumia Abu Jamal, who was somebody when my son first got. When he first got there, he kept telling me about Mumia. I'm like, who the heck is Mumia? And I finally found out who Mumia was. And also there's a prisoner named Brian Arroyo. Brian Arroyo, he fought. He's a jailhouse lawyer too. He's in there for life. He's innocent of his charges. But he sued and he helped organize prisoners to stop them from building some type of toxic plant near a prison in Frackville, Pennsylvania. Just closing, there's other liberation movements that kind of took place around the same time as the $6. The California hunger strike happened in 2013, and I found out they also did another hunger strike in June, this past June, for these conditions that you guys were all enduring. The same conditions are happening right now. And there's a movement in Alabama called the Free Alabama Movement. I met these guys. These guys was calling me on cell phone because they saw me on Facebook, and I've talked to them and, you know, learned a lot from them. They've done strikes and they've done hunger strikes, and they've also shut down the prison with work stoppage. And just to sell, I'm closing now.